I'm gonna go ahead and if we can all introduce ourselves.
Yeah,
So
everyone introduce themselves.
I'm Majestic, and I want to clarify my position. I'm obviously arguing tonight against Trump, and pretty much by default Bernie. Okay, now am I crazy about Bernie? No, but it's pretty much by default. It's more of a vote against Trump than it is for Bernie. However, there is a lot of policies that Bernie has put out which um, align with my values. Okay, so uh, just to give an introduction about myself and where my political leanings, I consider myself an independent. I'm a registered Democrat so that I can caucus with them, you know, so that I can vote in the primaries and what have you. It's
Mhm.
sad that it has to be that way, um, but I'm an independent because I'm an independent thinker. However, most of my leanings, as it pertains to social situations, is mostly on the Democratic leanings. As it pertains to social issues. Um, you know, I would say I like Tulsi Gabbard, but she turned me off as far as with her anti-BDS vote. Because anti-BDS vote is basically anti-free speech. Now, I don't want anybody to assume anything about me like I'm some kind of establishment uh, Democrat or whatever. So I want to clarify a few of my positions. I am pro First Amendment, freedom of speech, pro Second Amendment. I don't believe that they should regulate arms. So that's why I differentiate with the with the Democratic Party, as far as them trying to regulate guns and what have you. Also, I'm not necessarily against gay people, like whatever consenting adults do behind closed doors is none of my business. Just keep it out of my fucking face. I don't believe in, promoting it to kids and school age children. I think that's something that families should deal with. I'm a pro man advocate, you know what I mean? So I'm not with all this third wave feminism bullshit neither. Um, if I would have to describe a Republican that I do like, probably the only one that comes to mind would be Ron Paul. I respect him. I supported him during his initial campaign. So that's just to give a little bit of insights to where I stand politically. I'm totally 100% anti-Trump. You know what I mean? Mostly based on a lot of his, you know, negative attributes and characteristics. I mean, there's a plethora of things that I could name about him, such as him being a compulsive liar, um, a cheater and a contradictor. He doesn't really adhere to political norms and processes, which sometimes it's okay, but um, I believe that if you take a look at his cabinet, the turnover rate in his administration, it's embarrassing. You know, it's embarrassing for the American people. I believe that real men and real leaders of our country should be displaying reason, stoicism, self control, a diplomat and a gentleman. You know. Also, I'll get into this in the debate. Of course, I believe that he is a sellout to America. He's not America first. He's Israel first, and this can easily be explained by his huge Zionist cabinet, his war cabinet, and if you look at everybody who's been in his campaign and all the things that he has passed has served the interest of Israel over the interest of the American people. Not to mention, yes, I feel he's a bigot and a racist. Now, I I don't have to go at great length about his bigotry to make my point on a lot of the policy, foreign, you know, domestic decisions and foreign relations. However, that also is something that why I don't like the man as well. So that's just to give my introduction. And then if anybody has any questions or wants me to clarify anything, I welcome it, and I look forward to hearing everybody else's introduction and getting to know a little bit about their views before we start the debate.
Okay, that was a pretty long introduction. So let's go to the other progressive, or how we'd like to be called social libertarian.
Yeah,
Is your inside very similar to
yeah.
his?
Well, to make it simple, you could call me progressive for just this debate purpose. But I'll just say I wasn't really involved in politics until 2016 when I saw Bernie Sanders. And what intrigued me the most about him was his anti-corruption. And the reason I call myself a left libertarian over progressive or social democrat is more I'm supportive of ballot initiatives for people to decide, so bureaucrats. And also I'm more libertarian on a lot of issues, as I support the Second Amendment and the First Amendment. But I'm pretty left on economic issues. But even though I believe in free markets, but I think they still need to be regulation, just like what Theodore Roosevelt said. And I don't really care about candidate of their political party. I care about their policy. And I was planning to be registered as an independent. The floor is a closed primary, so I had to register as a Democrat.
Right on.
And that will be my introduction.
All right, let's move on to the pro-Trump side. Let's start with you, Brian.
Okay, so yeah, I consider myself a conservative. I lean on the right on most issues. The only issue Austin and I might differ on, but I can still argue devil's advocate, is on the topic of healthcare. I did a debate on that actually a few days ago with you, Moderate. I don't remember when that was, but yeah, I'm a little more. I'm not Medicare for all, but I am more left than most Republicans, I would say, on healthcare. And possibly a few other issues, but moreover, I can argue devil's advocate for a lot of these situations. In terms of what I'll be defending and arguing, I'll be defending a pro-Trump stance and an anti-Bernie stance. In terms of Bernie Sanders and his following, I think they're very good people. I think they have a very good heart, but the road to hell is paved in good intentions. And I think if we look at the consequences of a lot of the policies he's proposing, they'd be devastating to the economy, and there would be a lot of negative outcomes from it, which I hope we can get in and discuss a little bit of. I'm not entirely sure all the topics we plan on hitting on, but when it's something as broad as Trump versus Bernie, there's a lot of different avenues we can go. And hopefully we don't go too far down the rabbit hole. That's why the moderator's here. Immigration will be an interesting one, for sure. I think Hulk and I, for the most part, he's maybe a little bit further right than I am on immigration, but I will argue devil's advocate if need be. I believe healthcare was one of the topics we mentioned. Like I said, that's something I can do devil's advocate of. In terms of economics, I definitely oppose what Bernie Sanders has suggested in terms of the minimum wage, in terms of his taxes, in terms of spending, in terms of social programs. I think there's a lot of negative outcomes for those, which hopefully we can talk about. I'm somewhat in agreement in that as you don't see Bernie as perfect, I don't see Trump as perfect. But I would say he is most aligned with my ideals, especially in 2020 when really my only realistic options are Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, and Pete Buttigieg. So definitely, I mean, anything could happen, but I definitely plan on voting for Donald Trump in 2020. And I'll just end my introduction there.
Okay, so let's move on to Hulk.
I'll start by saying I'm his admin, not him specifically. Roman gave me the opportunity to admin for his page. But in terms of policy, I think the people that support Bernie Sanders actually will agree in terms of symptoms and problems a lot with what Trump says. That's why their voters kind of go back and forth between the two. We just have disagreements on execution. So I think we'll find a lot of common ground there. But in terms of what I personally represent, I represent a more hardline stance on immigration, both legal and illegal. Economically, I have a more moderate view in terms of the market. I don't think that the market should be controlled, like completely central management. But I also don't think that it should be free reign to do whatever, because companies will abuse that, in my opinion. In terms of healthcare and education, I'm not as partial to ideology when it comes to that. I just think what's best for the country is what should be done, rather than what's best for economics specifically or just people specifically. That there's more of a middle ground in that approach. So I'd say I'm more aligned with the ideals that Trump spoke about in 2016. I would have to agree with Majestic that he pivoted from the America First agenda and kind of forgot about us. But I still would, like conservatives said, vote for him. He still represents my ideals, and hopefully we can have a paradigm shift in 2020. But I'll end it there.
All right, so we still got 7 minutes until the main debate starts. So how are you guys feeling about this so far?
Yeah, good. Do you want me to send the sources?
You don't need to.
Okay, because I had the copy send it out.
I think if there's something that we disagree on as it pertains to source material, the good thing about uploading it later is that we can add those sources from all sides in the description. That way that we're not being one-sided about that. So
True.
I'm sure everybody's in agreement with that.
Yeah, and we're approaching this with a good faith, so we just have to assume that unless it sounds like total just smoke, BS, then call maybe for a source. But if it at least sounds reasonable, we're all probably speaking with articles and ideas we've read, heard, watched about, and things like that. So trying to find the specific, article at which I read that. I didn't go through step by step and do that today. I have like a couple citations, but not every single one.
I also suggest if you guys would like to just get into the main debate now, I'm totally fine with that.
I'm fine with that. No reason to wait the whole 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm ready too. I just want to add one more thing. So just from hearing you guys, this is obviously our first introductions meeting each other, except for Castiliano. I did see you guys' debate on the healthcare, but I wanted to add one more thing is, being the echo chambers that are out there, not only on the internet, but in the mainstream media and the left-right paradigm, I think it's imperative that we do have these conversations, because we might disagree on a lot of things, and we may also find common ground. That's what's missing, is because it's everybody is in their echo chambers. So what we can do better, which is to have this hard conversation, you know what I'm saying, and have some sort of level of respect, which I do feel what Trump has done to this country has been very divisive. So you see people being more disrespectful and off into their corners, and I think that it's healthy for the country that we're able to be able to have these debates, and where there is compromise and there's room for common ground, and you never grow as a person or as an intellectual if you don't hear other people's ideas and hear them articulate those ideas. So that's what I hope to be here, because I feel that the Democrats or the left, they don't represent me. There's a huge majority of people like me who are not these, people that these elite Democrats or these soft ass, these what do they call them? Snowflakes or whatever like that. Yeah, they may be overrepresented, but in inner cities where the voting bloc is, that doesn't necessarily mean that they align with how the majority of the actual people who go out and vote are. You know what I mean? So I hope to be a voice for that. And that being said, I'm ready to let the moderator get the main debate started.
Does anyone else have anything to say before we get started?
Yeah, one other topic that we consider talking about was race relations. I don't know if that will come up. I know that's not necessarily a major campaign point. However, I am open to talk about that as well, because I do think it's a pretty important topic to discuss.
I completely agree, and I definitely, when we get into the immigration segment, I don't think you can talk about immigration without talking about race. This country is plagued by racial divisions right now. I do think that I think it would be good to touch on it, and what would be good is, because it's such a huge issue and it has so many moving parts and so much history in this country, I think that could even be something that we could touch more in detail in a second debate. But again, I'll leave it up to happen organically and what have you. What do you think, Castiliano?
I think it'll be good. I'm good with whatever discussion we have.
Okay, we'll let the moderator get it started with questions or whatnot, and we'll let it happen organically, and he can rein us in or let us free however you want to rock it.
All right, so I guess we'll start with questions. We'll start with the topics of economics. So this will include things like healthcare, even some aspects of the environment. So I do have some questions. So I have for economics 2 questions for progressives and 2 questions for conservatives. I'll start with 1 question for the progressives. So, and this one is mainly regarding so this one is mainly regarding Sanders' spending policies, mainly Medicare for all, because that would cost most of them, but also digs into a little bit into some of his other ideals. So here it is. A study from the Urban Institute and Commonwealth Fund found that Bernie's Medicare for All program would cost $34 trillion on top of current federal health spending over the course of 10 years. The Committee for Responsible Federal Budget says that to fund this alone, and that's not including some of his other proposals, such as federal jobs guarantee, free college, Green New Deal, could require heavy tax increases. So, why don't you think there would be many economic consequences of a result of this new spending and tax increases?
All right.
Castiliano, go ahead, take this one, and I'll follow up.
All right, I'll start with the healthcare question, because the issue is our current healthcare system is around $3.5 trillion every year alone. And the reason our healthcare is so expensive compared to the developed world is since we have the for-profit health insurance. Sorry, it's like echoing. All right. But my point is, hold on, let me fix this computer.
While he's fixing that, I'm gonna say so. Go ahead and get your little spill together. I want to say that. So you said that it's estimated at $34 trillion now. Where's that estimate coming from? One, and then
Yeah, I stated
we have a lot of money out there. The question is, where is our money as Americans being allotted? You know what I mean? Of course, endless regime change wars. You know what I mean? Funneled into the pockets of corporations, tax havens and loopholes for the ones who you know make the most money. International corporations who also exploit America, which it could be argued that yes, Trump is in theory trying to do something about that, but I think it's a lot of lip service, being that he has ties with a lot of internationalists, and he always has. So as far as the money is concerned, I don't know about that. You could be right, but it's not a question of where do we get the money, because it's not when it comes to domestic issues, that's always the question that the right always, where are we going to get this money? We don't have the money for it. But when it goes to funding other countries, let's take Israel. Yeah, I'm gonna go hard on them. Oh, Derek, that's an anti-Semitic trope. Whatever, man. $3.1 billion were, I believe it was, that we would fund Israel. Now, mind you, this is a country, right? We have no treaties with or anything like that. This is a country who has a balanced budget. Why are we giving 3.1 billion with a B to a country that has a balanced budget when our budget isn't even balanced? Not even to mention when you get into the I don't know how well versed you guys are on, the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Treasury, and the IRS racket. You know what I mean? And how that as American people, we are exploited by paying taxes on our own money. But when it comes to economics, those issues can't be ignored. So the argument that I hear from the right all the time is, where's the money going to come from? Why is it that when it's coming to taking care of our own people, because we have a lot of problems here domestically, or when it comes to funding our needs, that it's a problem to get the money? But when it's these intervention wars and funding these other countries, that really it's these corporations who have a vested interest, via what's it called, stock market or whatever, they have a vested interest, so it's basically going back into their pocket. So I think that's a weak argument because it's always where we're going to get the money when it comes to funding this. The fact is that we continue to run up the debt. Shit, if we're going to run up the fucking debt, why not be for something that's going to benefit us, like infrastructure, education, and the likes? So that's my point on that. I'll let Castiliano get down to the numbers.
So just before,
I got my thing fixed.
good idea.
But wait, you're gonna say something?
Yeah. So what you're saying is that if the U.S. were just to, do more deficit spending and, cut funds from other areas to be able to pay for a lot of these programs that Bernie Sanders is proposing. So that's your main point.
I think it's a very valid point, and I mean, I'll post a link of, and I think it's from USAID website, so it's and I can post other sources, but it gives a list of all the money that is going abroad. Let's just say we cut that in half. You know what I mean? I don't think that's unreasonable. So the money's out there. We're already spending money. We're already going in debt, but we're going in debt for all the wrong things.
So how much money annually does the U.S. spend going abroad?
I don't have the overall number, but it's astounding. You know what I mean?
We have about $3 trillion worth of taxes that was supposed to go us, but they're over in the Cayman Islands. Well, not 3 trillion exactly, but trillions of dollars that's over there. And another thing, we spend tens of $20 billion every year for the oil companies and the banks. And we use $24 trillion to bail out the banks when they crashed the economy and did fraud to Americans, which they foreclosed their homes.
True. Let's not forget after 9/11, the $2.1 trillion that magically went missing from the Pentagon. I mean, we're so divided as a country between left and right that it's like a thief who's distracting you over here while they're actually fucking stealing your wealth and sending it abroad. And I think that needs to be addressed, and maybe we can find some common ground on that. So if the argument from the right is we don't have the money, you guys are going to put us in debt. No, we're already going in debt. We're already paying interest to a private corporation, the Federal Reserve, and to foreign interests. So that argument really doesn't hold any water when you look at it in context. Is my point.
Can I respond?
Before anyone responds, so is that your main point for both of you?
For me, Castiliano, you can get into the numbers, but I do have. Yes, that would be my main point. Yes.
Okay. Where
are you going to get the money from? Yeah.
Would you like So you've been talking for a while. I'd like the conservatives to respond.
Yes, please.
I guess Brian.
Sure. So the first thing I want to mention is you brought up funds being sent to other countries, and I think that's a discussion worth having. My big issue with that as a response, though, is you brought up giving a couple billion to Israel, and the reality is that would be a very, very small fraction of what Bernie Sanders is proposing. If you look, even if we were to go with a very light Obamacare-style healthcare system, which would be much cheaper than what Sanders is supposing, that's going to be 1.5 trillion about 10 years. So the idea that the money is there just by cutting that would be like putting pennies in a can and hoping to buy a car one day with it. It's just not particularly logical, I think, to say cut this, the money will be there.
Okay, but isn't this one of the things that Donald J. Trump said in his campaign that he was going to bring the troops home and all this garbage, which we know is false, and how a lot of that money is being spent over there. Another thing when it comes to economics and where we're going to get the money, this is where I'm going to. I am a socialist as it pertains to our resources here in America. Let me explain why. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Alaska, but I lived there for a few years, and in Alaska, these oil companies go in Alaska, and Alaska doesn't allow them just to drill and they take all the money. The people of Alaska get a dividend. Why is it that in the United States of America that it's all good for us allow these oil companies, regardless of where they come from, what country, private entities, to drill all this is supposed to be our country, right? Our land, all this, but the corporations get 100% of all of that money. why aren't we, the American taxpayer, getting a dividend in the form of money back into our economy? And why are we allowing them to basically rob that? Countries such as, like, okay, Venezuela would be a bad example, but that's another discussion. Saudi Arabia, they get dividends. I'll argue on Venezuela another day because there's a lot of moving parts to that.
Are you
But
a
let's say Saudi
Venezuelan?
Arabia,
Do
right?
you
They get
support the regime in
dividends.
Venezuela?
Can I add real quick to the?
Okay,
I
people
supported
stop.
Hugo
A lot of
Chavez.
people are talking over each other. So do you still have a point to make?
Can I add real quick to the economic argument from the conservative position? I'm
Yeah, yeah.
no
Sure.
I'm
Go.
no ideological person about spending. I agree with you in the sentiment that spending is not necessarily the worst thing, that the debt probably is going to go up, and that people that think that they can cut the debt away is a long lost libertarian 2010 dream that I wish that could happen, but no longer will. But that being said, the expenditures that Bernie Sanders promotes, the 34 trillion, it's not just, well, if we cut away cut away all the foreign aid, we could pay for it. You would have to cut all of the spending that the federal government does at all to be able to pay for it, because that 34 trillion over 10 years is 3.4 trillion dollars. So our federal expenditures are 4.1 trillion dollars. So conservatives are not necessarily arguing that the money's being spent. I mean, that some are, but most of the conservative voters aren't really, caring about the spending. It's more about how solvent it'll leave the system. If you're having to increase expenditures, or not expenditures, taxes and consumption, things like that, by $3.4 trillion per year, that's 3.4 trillion out of the economy, out of middle America's pockets, all for a healthcare system that is only expensive because preventative care is the thing that bogs down the system. Preventative care is something that is obesity, heart disease, diabetes, those types of things from Americans not taking care of themselves. So in reality, the healthcare system isn't really broken as it is the people are overusing the resources we have for the healthcare system. I'll end it with that.
Hey, can I make a point?
So would the progressives like to make a response to that?
All right, so yeah, I agree about how the preventative care makes our modern healthcare expensive, but I want to bring up some numbers. Our current healthcare spending right now is $3.6 trillion every year, which to say that our healthcare didn't increase at all with our current system. It would be about $36 trillion over a 10-year decade. A Medicare for all, it varies 32 or 34. It would save money because the administration costs, because we get rid of that private health insurance because it was really duplicative care. So, and if everyone has a universal healthcare system, you're not fearing of going to the doctor because of copays, deductibles, and everything like that. So they'd be able to see whatever diagnoses they have and health problems, so it prevents it from getting any worse. And many of the developed countries, they spend half, but they have higher quality healthcare than we do.
Okay, so hold before anyone says something. So I think now is a perfect moment to get into another question. So this one would be for the conservatives regarding what you said about costs. So those in support of Medicare for all often cite that Medicare for all will not overcall. All Americans would be significantly cheaper than the current system. According to the OECD, Americans spend $10,586 per capita on healthcare, while other countries with single payer healthcare pay much less. Norway pays, for example, $6,187 per capita, Canada $4,974 per capita, and so on. Why do you think there's a large cost difference between these countries, and why wouldn't the cost decrease under a single-payer healthcare system?
I tend to kind of disagree with the sentiment that you can even compare the United States to the rest of the world. Most of these things are taken by European countries, which are predominantly Europeans in the country. Which are predominantly the same gene pool, genome, which means that they have the same type of health related issues, the same types of, that biological similarities. Whereas our country, we are so different that because of that, cultural differences and things like that also play into effect in health differences. So it's not really fair to compare the United States to European countries, in my opinion, in that sense. But I would also argue that, again, like I said earlier, the biggest cost, and if you talk to any doctor, nurse, or anybody in the healthcare system, it is preventative healthcare. So I would say the alternative to socializing the healthcare system, increasing the tax burden and things like that, and to decrease the cost of healthcare would be to getting society back to having a healthy, being healthy, first off, being socially popular, getting away from these chemicals, these fast food type things. I think that there needs to be greater regulation on that. I'm a conservative, but in the sense that a conservative for the nation, not a conservative in principle only. I have more of a realpolitik type of guy. I think that the government has a imperative when it comes to this stuff, because it's not even if we get away from costs, the quality of life for people that are unhealthy due to preventative health care is so low. I would hate to live like that. So because of that, this is something that we should step in and start, maybe not regulating, but creating economic incentives, tax breaks for reported, gym membership, something I can't think of, obviously, the system now, but I think there is a way that we can do preventative healthcare and keep it private. That way we're not increasing public costs for no reason.
So I have a few things to answer your question with. One way that spending is probably lower in a lot of those countries is the fact that doctors earn significantly less in those systems. It's also true in the United States. If you look at payment through Medicare, the payment's much less than that of private insurers. And if you look at places like Canada, you'll see the average specialist makes about 30% less. If you look at the United Kingdom, it's about 50% less. And yeah, you kind of cut some costs there, but it also comes at an issue of doctor shortages, which is a real issue in a lot of those countries, which has a lot of negative consequences, like lowering the bar of going into medical school. And the other thing they're paying for is quality. I know that was mentioned earlier that the United States doesn't have good quality healthcare. I've read a lot of those studies, and I don't think they're particularly accurate based on what I've read. And we can get into, whether or not the United States ranks 38 out of 40 in terms of healthcare, because I don't think that's particularly accurate. If you look at a lot of those studies, they omit certain factors like 30-day heart attack survival rate, 30-day stroke heart attack rate. That wasn't included in the data. If you look at a lot of the common cancers where the United States citizens do very well, survive. It also put an emphasis on factors like infant mortality rate, which I've talked about before on why that's not a fair measurement. Number one being the different standards countries use, and number two, because the United States has a higher premature birth rate compared to those other countries. So the United States is kind of at an unfair advantage there. I would say the United States does have pretty good quality healthcare. Doctors make very well. They're very qualified. It does come at a higher price, but you can't just cut money and not lose any quality in return.
Okay.
Point taken. Wait, hold on.
All right.
All
So
good points. I'll be brief. Let me say one thing real quick, man. I'm gonna come at it from an angle that we're not talking about. Let's be honest here. Let's be honest. The healthcare industry in general, which includes the pharmaceutical industry, is a for-profit industry. Any for-profit industry, they're in it to make money. When you have a for-profit industry, they don't have your best intentions. Why, if you're in the industry, you're not in the industry of healing people. You know what I mean? So we're not approaching this from a public health, public service standpoint. It is a for-profit industry. I hope we don't I heard you guys had a debate on this. I don't want the healthcare thing. It's a complicated issue. It's a big one to take up too much of our time. But I wanted to make that point that that is a big part of the problem, that it's a for-profit industry. And they're not in the business of healing people. That's all I want to say on that.
Okay, so is that your response? Do you or your partner have anything else to say in response?
I'll just say one more thing.
Okay, go ahead.
So yeah, I do agree about the preventative care and trying to help get Americans healthier. Obviously, not through actual government regulation, just incentives. I do agree with that. And one thing I need to say with the healthcare about according to Harvard, 46,000 Americans die every year because they can't afford the healthcare that they need. Also, 500,000 Americans go bankrupt every year because they can't afford any healthcare that they need. So I know you guys disagree with any of the universal healthcare, but this is our current system that we have right now. This phone call is done. Okay, I'll continue.
Well, let's move on because I think you guys already
Okay, so
discussed
I'll
this
ask
at great
another
length. I think
question.
there's a lot of other issues.
Is it okay if I respond to that real quick in terms of the
Oh, yeah, you
bankruptcy?
can make a response and I'll ask another question.
So the bankruptcy claim, there are people who declare bankruptcy. However, it's generally not due to actual medical expenses. It's due to the fact that it's difficult to actually work post-hospital. Also, the rate is actually pretty low. If you look at bankruptcies that are declared, it's less than 4%. And a lot of it isn't necessarily due to the medical expenses. The way it normally works is when you check into a hospital, you either apply for government assistance if you're poor. If you're not poor and you don't have insurance, then they usually put you on a payment plan of some sort, which is based off the income you make. Now, I think there's ways we can adjust that to make it better for people and more affordable. Like I said, I talked about that more in depth on the healthcare debate. But if your healthcare, let's say you go to a hospital and you rack up $300,000 in medical debt. Number one, that debt's not shared with anyone outside the hospital. It doesn't affect your credit score, for example. And number two, there are flexible payment plan options. So you're not expected to pay even a large chunk of that back. It might be $20 a month. So that's usually not what actually gets people.
Fuck it, just let me die. I'm not getting stuck with that debt.
It's $10 a month. Unless you're rich, I guess.
Okay, so because I'll move on to another question. This one is about the economy in general. So this is for the progressives. For the past 3 years under Trump, the economy has been doing well. Unemployment has fallen to 3.5%. 2018 has seen over 3% GDP growth. The stock market is booming. Poverty is increasing, etc. Why do you think Trump shouldn't receive any, if not all, credit for this economy?
Clarification. Did you say poverty is increasing or decreasing? I think you meant to say decreasing.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry about that.
Okay, I'm skeptical of those numbers. Okay, so but for argument's sake, let's say that did you say what 3.6% increase in what pay? Are you saying?
Like I said, the unemployment rate has fallen to 3.5%. GDP in 2018 has increased over 3%.
Okay, let's say all those numbers are true, which I don't. We know that there's flaws in recording the unemployment rate because if you are not no longer even working, and then they consider, oh well, this person's working, but they might only be making. I think 44% of people make fucking $18,000 a year, which ain't shit. So if you're making a couple extra dollars, got a couple extra dollars in your pocket, but the cost of living is increasing faster, and the cost of living and rent is going higher, then that really doesn't. That's not keeping up pace. You know what I mean? If you actually look at a chart, inflation is still rising. The dollar is decreasing in value and relative to the cost of living and what have you. So I don't know how much credit I would really give him that, just because he says we're in the greatest economy ever. Da, da, da. Look, there's more homelessness, there's more poverty. I don't feel it when I'm rolling around. I see people struggling more. There was a time in this country where a man could support his family on his income alone. When the feminism movement came, and then you had 2-parent households. Now you got people that are living 3, 4 in a house who are barely making it. So I think it's a stretch to say that everything's all good. There's nothing to worry about. And I do think there's automation and ruthless companies with the disparity between the ratio of what CEOs make as opposed to worker is really high. Castiliano, you want to say something on that?
Oh yes, I have plenty to talk about this. So, yeah, obviously I have the sources, and half of Americans make $30,000 a year or less, and 83% of
30,000 or
Americans live
40,000?
paycheck. 30,000, less than 30,000, and 83% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And you have to understand the poverty line, 12,000 same, but it doesn't always count for the costs with expenses. You know, like obviously in California, like San Francisco or LA, New York, those big cities, the cost of living is very high over there. And Obama whenever before he was in as president, he shipped 80,000 this freaking echoing. Okay. 8,000 jobs he shipped out. And to both the conservatives, you probably supported Trump when he was going against the trade deals. But when Trump took office, he shipped 93,000, more than what Obama did before. And
Okay, let me. Oh, never mind. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm just.
our market economic indicator doesn't determine how Americans are doing. Like the life expectancy is actually going down. And
Can I address? Oh, sorry.
yes, yeah.
It's okay that I talk.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I was
go ahead.
interrupted. Oh, all right. So, conservatives. Brian, would you like to respond?
Yeah, so a few things. In terms of the unemployment rate, it was mentioned, I think what was getting brought up was, is there a relationship between the worker participation rate and unemployment rate? The reason why we use unemployment and why we don't just look at how many people are working is because there's some people who, regardless of the economy, won't work. There's a portion of the population like that. It's also not fair to count, retired grandma as unemployed because she's not really part of the workforce. So that's why we economists are okay using the unemployment rate, is because it's adjusting for those factors. In terms
So let me just add real quick, the U6 unemployment, and no, I'm just adding to a statistic, and then he can continue.
Okay, just
the use even so, the U6 unemployment rate is only 6.5%. So that's including all the people he was just talking about. So it's still only at 6.5%.
It's still pretty slow. Yeah, and then in addition to that, you mentioned the gap between a CEO and a worker. Actually, I posted about this earlier. The lower incomes, the rate at which their wages are rising, are higher than that of the upper class. If I actually posted the graph on there later, I can show you guys if you'd like. The reason why CEOs make more is just a product of supply and demand in terms of how in demand their skills are needed and how many people can supply it. That's what's essentially dictating their wages.
Can I chime in real quick? And I have a question
Sure.
for you guys.
One last thing I'd like to mention about the trade. I actually not a huge fan of Trump's trade deals. They haven't been as bad as I thought because I'm not a big fan of trade wars with our allies like Canada, like England, Mexico. I'm not a big fan of that. China, a little bit of a different story. But generally speaking, no, I'm pretty free trade.
Okay. Is that it? Would you like progressive? Would you like